and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, U.S. President Barack Obama tours Europe, where he's pleading for unity within the continent. But as his final days in the White House inch closer, what sort of impact will his visit really bear? And in India, where cash is king, what will the dramatic currency transformation mean for the nation? We take a look at how its businesses and people cope with the sudden change. And we open today's show with U.S. President Barack Obama, who is currently in Germany in what is his last tour in Europe before leaving the White House. His final visit is overshadowed, though, by the victory of President-elect Donald Trump, who has raised the concerns of the traditional transatlantic alliance. So how will President Obama try to calm his allies who have been fearful of the Trump effect?
A farewell trip. U.S. President Barack Obama is on his final foreign trip to Europe, and he heads to the continent with an upbeat message. Earlier in Greece, he argued that there will be more continuity than disruption in the transatlantic alliance, especially in NATO.
Whether it's been under a Democratic or Republican administration, that commitment will continue, including our pledge and our treaty obligation to defend every ally.
Obama defends globalization, but also says the fear and anger towards it are understandable as widening inequality unfolds.
But I have argued that the current path of globalization demands a course correction. In the years and decades ahead, our countries have to make sure that the benefits of an integrated global economy are more broadly shared by more people, and that the negative impacts are squarely addressed.
Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric is in stark contrast to those values that have tied the two continents. Though Obama is trying to calm Washington's allies, his eloquence is far from reassuring Europeans who are worried about Trump's effect. Several far-right parties across Europe have welcomed Trump's victory. Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage was one of the first foreign politicians Trump contacted. Elections are also coming up for several European Union member countries, and the bloc is facing a rising sentiment in populism.
Today, more than ever, the world needs a Europe that is strong and prosperous and democratic. But all institutions in Europe have to ask themselves, how can we make sure that people within individual countries feel as if their voices are still being heard?
In Berlin, Obama will speak with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. He will then meet with several other leaders, like the UK's Theresa May, France's François Hollande, Italy's Matteo Renzi, and Spain's Mariano Rajoy. But as Obama prepares to leave the White House, many are wondering if his words will still count when Trump moves in come January.
To discuss President Obama's trip to Europe, we are joined in Beijing Mr. Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Also joining us in London, in the United Kingdom, Mr. Ian Beck, a professorial research fellow at the European Institute at the London School of Economics. Welcome as well. First of all, how much will President Obama be able to convey to his European counterparts, including right now in Germany, about a smooth transition from his administration to President-elect Mr. Trump's? Mr. Beck.
Well, I think we have to recognize that these days Obama has no power left. He's in a transition. The US system, though, is very robust. It facilitates the transition from one president to another. That will happen smoothly, and what we'll wait to see is who Trump is appointing to his critical positions: Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Treasury. These are the important positions that will signal very clearly what kind of administration Trump wants to run. It may be that what we're seeing in the last few days, namely rowing back a bit from some of his more extreme promises, a fence on the Mexican border and not a wall, not destroying everything in Obamacare. These indications that Trump in power may well be very different from Trump the candidate, who had to play to the gallery to try to get himself elected.
Mr. Beck,
so
on the other hand,
I think we should be aware that the U.S.
On the other hand, Mr. Beck, as you may be very much aware, that inside Washington, in the Trump campaign, there has been a lot of divisions as to whether they go with the Republican establishment or whether they go with some of the fundamental members of the rhetorical campaign they run. So now it seems that they have an internal struggle. Are European counterparts going to be comforted by the apparent phenomena over the past few days?
I think that Europeans will be slightly relieved to see that the extreme appointments that were possible are being watered down by Trump. For example, his chief of staff is a Republican insider. That's not a radical politician that he might have selected. However, these are early days. We don't yet know what Trump will really do once he's in power, and that's what the anxiety at European level will continue to be, that he does things which are extreme seen through European eyes.
Right. Mr. Cui, how much is this trip made by President Obama about protecting his own legacy in terms of the transatlantic relationship? How much is it? It's about his introductory to his European counterpart about a new president-elect.
Yeah, as we know, I think the President Obama for his European trip is firstly to calm down, especially this upset from this his allies in Europe, because as we know, it was another shock for most of the European people.
Well, for a lot of people around the world, I guess.
Yes, exactly, especially after the Brexit. And I think now the problem is how about this lower and lower confidence about the alliance between the transatlantic say. And also, of course, now the question is, because after another 2 months, there will be new president in the United States. So how much of the effect of this trip by Mr. Obama to Europe, which means that how many people in Europe, they can still believe what's the message from Mr. Obama. I think now more European people, they focus on Washington, on Mr. Trump, not Mr. Obama.
So you don't think Mr. Obama will be able to in any way protect his legacy through this trip at all?
Yes.
What about you, Mr. Beck? Is he able to do a little bit of that, protecting his legacy, transatlantic partnership?
Well, he may be reminding people that the good times were me and now you have to face the much more difficult times of my successor. In that sense, his legacy will be protected because they'll remember the good guy. But I think we need to listen quite carefully to some of the things he's been saying in Athens. For example, that the world needs to wake up to the fact that globalization is not only about winners. There are people who've lost from globalization. And Obama is right to signal that the success of Trump, the success of Brexit in the UK, the strong standing of Front National in France or Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, these are all symptoms of a widespread disaffection with some of the effects of globalization. So one thing that Obama is very carefully doing is planting the point that other countries have to react to this phenomenon and not just dismiss it as something weird happening in the US.
All right. But let's talk about something specific rather than ideology. We'll put that also a little bit later for discussion. Mr. Beck, international relations, transatlantic partnership, one of it is Obama's alliance with the European counterparts against Russia. As you may know, sanctions against Russia regarding Syria and other things, Ukraine, has already been rolled out by the European countries starting from 2014, coming to an end at the end of January coming year, which is also the time President Trump coming into the office. So is that part of the transatlantic relationship still likely to be maintained or not? Thoughts from the European countries, Mr. Beck?
Well, I don't think NATO, which is the defense treaty that combines European countries with the US and with Turkey, is really under threat. Trump talks about asking the Europeans to pay more towards their defense, which, let's be blunt, they should be doing because it's unfair to expect the Americans to shoulder all the burden of this. On dealing with Syria, it seems to be pretty clear that the Obama European approach to dealing with Syria has not worked. It hasn't solved the problem. It's led to the war continuing for a very long, much longer than anybody expected, and it's really only the Russians who are leading on it. Trump, in this sense, may well have identified the need to recast that European-American policy towards Syria in a way which resolves the problem rather than prolonging it. So I think if you pick into these individual dossiers, you find that there are things that maybe need to be reset and Trump's an opportunity to do it.
Mr. Cui, what do you think? So it seems, according to Mr. Begg, if the sanctions does not continue, it might be not necessarily a bad thing.
Yes, as we know, anyway, I think it's related to another issue, and very, very, attracted so many eyes from both of sides of Atlantic say is how about the future of the relation between United States and Russia, as we know, because once there are some more good, better relations, as Mr. Trump mentioned during the campaign, that between United States and Russia, certainly it will undermine the reason why NATO needed to still alive, because as we know, always this NATO is a result of the confrontation between United States and Russia. But of course, I think that besides the NATO issue, another very, very big concern from the European side is how about economic and trade relations between United States and the European Union.
Right.
As we know, after the reign of the Mr. Trump, European Union have to suspend the negotiation of TTIP, as we know, because the NATO is one of the security pillar
Right.
of these transatlantic relations. But how about the TTIP? Maybe another stronger economic and trade investment pillar. But now it looks like everything is unpredictable.
So, Mr. Begg, it seems that, do you agree with what Mr. Cui just said, that the Europeans are not necessarily going to, quote-unquote, stand up against Russia alone if the U.S. is going a very different direction? For example, as Mr. Trump, the president-elect, suggested in his campaign, even personal meetings with President Putin and his personal admirations for President Putin. What about the European counterparts? If U.S. changes, European changes.
Well, if Europe comes together, it's a more powerful economic and military entity ultimately than Russia. Let's not forget that Russia is a country of 130 million, 140 million people with a weak economy and obsolete technologies in many areas except the military. If there is an agreement at European level to try to deal with Russia, it's going to be effective. Now the problem is, as you know from many previous programs that you've done, the divisions within Europe on the best approach. To some extent, they've relied on the Americans, and the fact of the Americans being in NATO and giving the armed support to Europeans means that Europe does not need to get its act together. If Trump signals some withdrawal from that, the impetus on Europe would be to say, okay, we're now responsible for our own destiny, we have to do far more than we have in the past, and we have to stop the petty divisions amongst us. That may be sounding very optimistic, but it's the sort of thing that can trigger change in Europe in a positive direction.
Mr. Cui, what do you think? Two directions. One is maybe Europe, just as the United States, is going to make huge changes in terms of attitude toward Russia, no matter what the Russia's actions and reactions are. Secondly, is maybe a more united Europe, optimistically speaking, and stand up to Russia as the Europeans believe as important throughout the past few years.
I think now, as we know, especially on this attitude towards Russia from European side, from American side, indeed, originally they do have some divergences or differences. But now the question is, I think that it depends on how this reaction from firstly Russian side, and how close of Mr. Trump's United States and Mr. Putin's Russia.
We'll see how the United States is really reacting. In Washington now, we are also joined by Brandon Andrews, former U.S. Senate staff and also director of Impact, an organization which empowers young professionals politically. But his identity is more Republican rather than Democrat. Republicans, of course, I would like to present this question to you. Congress, all Republican now, and also the president, coming at least at this moment, he's also Republican related. So what do you make of the future relations with Europe? Will that be similar to what the president-elect addressed during his campaigns, or likely to make a sudden turn as he did with many other policies after becoming president-elect? Mr. Andrews, very briefly.
Yeah, well, Mr. Trump and his transition team are currently being briefed up on everything in the national security front. General Michael Flynn has been put forth as nominee to head the National Security Council for Donald Trump, and so it'll be important to take a look at Michael Flynn's background to see where we go going forward. But I think really all of this goes back to the economy. Look at the date December 9th and the week of December 9th. That is when the budget deal runs out for Congress, and so you'll see Congress setting budget priorities for national security and for other things going forward.
Right.
And December 9th is also the date when the U.S. Fed, Janet Yellen, could hike interest rates. And if that happens, there may be some significant effects to the U.S. economy, which may drive Donald Trump to change his course in some ways in terms of how he's approaching the U.S. economy, globalization, and the relationship with Europe, which of course will impact NATO and our national security structure.
Well,
So
maybe
look at the week of
we
December
have to be a
9th
little bit
to see.
specific here. It sounds a little bit abstract what you have just said. For example, TTIP, which is a very important trade pact between the United States and also Europe. Likely what to happen during the campaign, very harsh words, but now, Mr. Andrews.
Yeah, I think he's gonna move forward with some kind of different deal there. I think the reality is that because of who he was running against Hillary Clinton, who is the wife of Bill Clinton. He blamed a lot of the job loss, a lot of the deflated wages in the United States on some of the trade deals that President Clinton put into place. And so I think Donald Trump has to, because so much of his base was interested in having a more equitable economic recovery. I think he's going to have to do some things that are going to be more protectionist. But again, the reality is, if it doesn't work for the economy, if the economy slows down, if we see macroeconomic indicators go south for the U.S. and globally, then that's going to change what Donald Trump is going to do when he's in office. There's no way that he can continue with protectionist policies if the economy is tanking.
All right, Mr. Begg, let me ask you, what's the best scenario? I mean, the worst scenario we'll all know that will be just happening as the rhetorics of Mr. Trump, but the president-elect during his campaign. What is the best scenario, for example, TTIP, from the European perspective?
Well, I think it's worth making the point that it's not just in the United States or among Trump supporters that enthusiasm for TTIP has been diminishing. There's several countries in Europe which are very uneasy about it, including, and this may surprise you, Germany, where there's not a huge support for TTIP. And with Britain on the cusp of exiting the EU, TTIP is losing one of its stronger supporters. So I think there's likely to be the same sort of sentiment on both sides of the Atlantic about scaling back the ambitions of TTIP and going for a more limited deal, which is going to be less scary for the workers on both sides of the Atlantic.
Right. This has a lot to do not only with American politics, but also the politics in the European continent. Take a look at the challenges in this respect over the next 10 months in Europe. Next month, Italy will hold a referendum on constitutional reform, and on the same day, Austria will decide on a new election. Next year, citizens in France, Germany, and the Netherlands are all heading to the polls as well. Elections after elections. So elections always being manipulated on messages coming from politicians toward the realities, popping up the dissatisfaction in the society toward a extreme policy, at least during the rhetoric in the campaigns that we see in the U.S. We're also seeing some of the European capitals. Mr. Cui, how much turbulence shall we still expect ahead, even if the Trump administration rolling back from their previous rhetoric in Europe?
I think no matter how it is a real policy by Mr. Trump after he get into White House, I think this phenomenon we call the Trump's victory already gave a very big shock to European politics, because as we know that the first political figure Mr. Trump met is Mr. Farage. I mean, this very popular political figure in UK who supported this Brexit. And how about this kind of connectivity or connection relation between some populist parties in European Union, European countries, and also Mr. Trump? So I think it itself already gave lots of reasons why those mainstream parties, mainstream political leaders in European Union, they felt upset, they felt unsafe from this victory of Mr. Trump.
And Mr. Andrews, from the U.S. perspective, if there are more conservative politicians popping up inside the European capitals, does Mr. Trump, the president-elect and future president, will have more consent together with the Republican Party going more conservative side, even about the trade, which is different from the establishment yearly policy of the Republican Party?
Well, I think it's going to be predicated upon Donald Trump's first 100 days or so in office.
That's right.
He said that he wants to go in with his pen and roll back some of the things that President Obama did in terms of executive orders over the last 8 years. If the response from the economy, if the response from the U.S. public generally is positive, then that's going to embolden and empower, I think, other would-be populist leaders in Europe and across the world. And so I think if we have to look at Donald Trump's first 100 days and whether or not those executive orders are going to lead to a bump in the polls for him and lead to, again, the economy being healthy.
I see.
And if so, then yes, we'll definitely see a more conservative movement, and conservative leaders around the world will have kind of a rallying cry and a great example to look to in addition to Theresa May in the UK.
Right. Mr. Bragg, final words from you very briefly. Is this a chicken and egg thing? If U.S. acts, everybody acts, or this is a mutually feeding toward one another, this political momentum?
Well, I think the image of Nigel Farage and Trump meeting in Trump Towers signals that there is a new wave of politicians. If you put their names together, you get Farump. So maybe we should start talking about Farumpism.
Well, there are so many terminologies popping up every day, sir, but certainly that's one of those very interesting ones as well. Needs to study more. Ian Beck, Brandon Andrews, Cui Hongjian. Gentlemen, the three of you really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, still to come on our program. India pulls out the popular 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, leaving millions frustrated and helpless. Is this a smart move in the long run? What exactly is its purpose? You're watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing, Monday to Friday. We turn our attention now to India, where queues are stretching halfway down the streets outside banks. Indians in and out of the country are flustered after it was announced that all 500 and 1,000 rupee notes would be taken out of circulation, rendering them effectively worthless. The government says this move is in an effort to crack down on corruption and what is known as black money. But will it really work, and what's really behind this?
Shock and panic. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave only 4 hours notice last Tuesday night that the country's commonly held 500 and 1,000 rupee notes would be taken out of circulation. New notes with better security features will replace them, and Indians have until the end of December to exchange their notes. This drastic move is all in a bid to tackle corruption and tax evasion, which have hobbled the nation.
This is a major cleanliness drive. This is not to disturb anyone. I know it has inconvenienced people. India is a huge nation, and 50 days have been given to people to submit their honest earnings. And in exchange, the money will be credited to their accounts.
India is overwhelmingly a cash economy, with nearly 90% of all transactions taking place with banknotes. As a result, huge numbers of Indians have stashes of tax-free cash hidden away, known as black money. Most common Indians resent the fact that many of the richest have used black money to evade taxes, which is why they find it tolerable to suffer a few weeks of temporary hardship just to see tax evaders face justice.
Even I'm an entrepreneur, and I can understand that because of the black money, we too face a lot of problem. So I think it's a good step by the Narendra Modi government, and it should go a long way in terms of curbing black money within the country.
Still, the sudden shift has made a big impact. Both notes make up around 85% of the country's money supply, and throughout the past week, banks and ATMs have been running out of cash. The queues are getting longer and angrier.
You can see what's going on inside over there. It's just like a huge crowd. I have to face out for being in a line and go through the line and depositing my money and everything.
The government hopes the move will push more Indians to embrace credit cards and electronic transactions towards a cashless economy that curbs corruption and keeps black money in check. But people still have their doubt. The rich may have assets hidden in gold, jewelry, and property, and the demonetization scheme may hit small business traders hard. So the big question remains, will it work?
Will it work or not? To answer that question, we are joined in Beijing by Professor Fu Jun, professor from Peking University National School of Development at Peking University. Meanwhile, joining us from New Delhi in India, we have Mr. Madhav Nalapat, who is UNESCO Peace Chair and Director of the Geopolitics and International Relations Department at Manipal University in India. I want to welcome the two of you, professors. So, Professor Nalapat, let's begin with you. What do you make of the level of anger among the Indian public about the latest policy regarding the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes?
Well, the level of anger will be very high if this kind of a situation continues for about a week more. And it's going to be extremely high if it continues for 2 weeks more. The reason why the Prime Minister did this was that he has long had his eye on the informal economy. The informal economy is outside the reporting system of government. It doesn't pay taxes. It operates largely on cash. So it's completely uncontrolled by any government mechanism. Now, Prime Minister Modi tried to introduce what's called Jan Dhan accounts, people's accounts, where tens of millions of people were allowed to have bank accounts with zero balance. He's tried to go in for payment schemes, of direct payment schemes from government to the person without any in-between. So this process basically is to ensure the, if I may say so, the collapse of the informal economy and making the entire economy formal. The problem in India is at least 20 to 40% of the economy is the informal economy, and whether you can change that in a short period of time is a very, very difficult question.
It is a difficult question. The way to answer a question is not only look at the realities, but also in history, what has been tried, what has failed, what has succeeded. If we remember right, there were so-called fight against the black money in history. 2 previous similar attempts in the nation's history. 1946, for example. 1 and 5 and 10,000 rupee notes were taken out of circulation, a punitive gesture towards black marketing. Then, in the year 1978, then government deemed the 3 notes illegal for the second time to crack down on counterfeits and black money. But both moves, some suggest, turn out to be a total failure. So, question to you, Professor Nalapat. It hasn't succeeded earlier twice, both of them. Then why should we believe it's going to succeed this time? And what's really behind Mr. Modi's administration's decision?
Well, he's packaged this as an anti-corruption measure, but you're right. And the difficulty is about 70% of bribes and 70% of illegal money comes outside the cash system. For example, exports. Supposing you undervalue your exports and collect the money there in cash in some Swiss account, or overvaluation of imports. You pay more than the imports are worth, and that extra money is credited by the supplier to some Swiss account. So 70% of this kind of money is completely outside the cash economy. Of the balance, about 15% is through the banking system, through various, for example, bogus accounts, multiple accounts. So only a very small portion of bribes is actually paid in the form of cash, and that too mostly to middle and lower level officials. So, but as the second point is, what is being done is not demonetization. It is exchange of one currency for the other. Now, just because the new rupee is colored pink instead of blue, the policeman is not going to stop demanding a bribe. The village officer is not going to stop demanding a bribe. The official is not going to stop demanding a bribe. So there is really no way in which this can stop bribery. That's a much deeper problem than simply a change in the color of currency.
Right. Well, we certainly understand the motivation if it is about cracking down on corruption. But as Professor Nalapat said, 2 points very clearly. One is that it has always been a small proportion that is handled in cash. Secondly, it failed in all previous times when similar practices were being used as policy. Professor Fu, coming with your perspective in the government, in the so-called national governments, what do you make of the real attempt behind this policy? Is this a politician struggling to make a mark about his policy to his voters at this moment that he rolled this controversial one out?
Well, I have to give credit to Modi. He has been consistent with his campaign slogans. He will go very hard on corruption. And technically, I have to say this is a very smart move. We may refer to past experiences, but we have new conditions now. Past experiences, you do not have.
What are the new conditions that will make you it could be a success?
Overall, the economy is more connected on the internet, and in other words, technically it makes the new moves more feasible. India, a bulk of the Indian economy has been in cash, and this is very difficult to trace down the corruption. Now, the bureaucrats' salaries tend to be transparent. This is a certain money you should earn. If you deposit all your money electronically, there is a physical trace of where the money comes from. So in a very significant way, that will improve the system to track down the money flows as far as those bureaucrats are concerned. So I think this is a very smart move on the part of Modi to make that. For the massiveness of this movement, there will have inconveniences, but when you compare the potential significance of those with the inconveniences, it's worth the efforts. And after all, India probably is on the verge to turn from a cash transaction economy to a more formal economy. And this is very important for the modern economy. And as I said, now we have the technical facilities to do that.
It's very interesting, your argument. I think 2 points are interesting. I'd like to throw it back to Professor Nalapat. First of all, do you agree, Professor Nalapat, with Professor Fu's argument that a sudden change of policy, getting rid of certain currency notes, will be able to upgrade the overall Indian financial system overnight?
Well, I'd just like to point out that if the professor were to come with me to some villages in India, he'll find that many of them are 10, 20 miles away from a bank. And I would like the professor to come walking with me in the hot sun or in the rain 20 miles to a bank to exchange money. There are very good reasons why a lot of Indians transact in cash, and part of the reason is very poor banking infrastructure in the country. Now, for example, we have around 125,000 ATMs that are supposed to be working. Now, the whole problem that we are facing now, there are too few bank branches, there are too few ATMs. And the second problem we are facing is large numbers of small retail establishments handle only cash. Now, we know, unlike in the case of China, where you've got Walmart over, you've got all these big chains over, India, we haven't got that. The small trader, the small businessman is still the mainstay of the supply of food and essentials to the bulk of the population. Now, making these people jump from cash to credit card is, it may be possible, but I don't think it's going to be done in about 10 days or 15 days. And my view is, in 10 to 15 days, if the money supply is not normalized, there's going to be a very serious situation in the countryside and in the poorer areas of towns. The ironic situation is, this is hitting the poor, this is hitting the rural poor especially the most.
Professor Nalapat, another point made by Professor Fu, while he's observing the situation from China, of course, I think we would all love to walk with you 20 miles in India, whether it's in the sun or in the rain, to get to know the real situation. So we also need your expert on that point, which is whether corruption can be curbed with a technical move which is to remove a certain amount of currency notes. Will that, a technical move, be able to change the fundamental logic behind the bribery situation?
See, Prime Minister Modi is a very experienced administrator, but I think in this matter he has been led by his officials. Now there are two problems regarding corruption. Corruption is really caused, not the giver of the bribe is less important than the taker of the bribe. It's caused by the government having too much power over too much of the economy. In India, the government is much more powerful on the economy than even the government in China. Although the Chinese government is supposed to be much more bigger and powerful, it's the Indian government that has got more rules, more regulations and more restrictions.
Right.
Now the more harder the rules, the more the corruption, the more the bribery. So what is needed to be done is lower regulation and lower taxes. We haven't seen lower regulation, we have seen more and more regulation, more and more power going to officials, and the officials love it. They'll make tons of money out of this. And we need lower taxes. Now even people who are not earning, from international standards very much, they are paying 50-55%, if not 60 to 65% of their income, direct and indirect, as taxes. So you need lower taxes, lower regulation, and that is what you need basically to fight corruption.
I see. Professor Nalapat has given a very resourceful answer, certainly a lot of information for all of us to digest here. Professor Fu, same question to you. Can emergency policies be able to change the direction of fundamental issues in a country?
Well, in a way, I still think this is a very smart technical move in the right direction. There will be cases of inconveniences. Of course, I haven't had a chance to walk in the streets, but we still do not see.
But you saw the long line that we played in the background there.
It's just shots, right? I still do not see the overall picture up and down the country. To me, it's a very technical, smart move. And of course, that move itself won't be enough. As our India counterpart said, to deal with the more fundamental causes of the corruption, power needs to be decoupled with the resources, and the decoupling, and the critical part of decoupling is to have a round of deregulation. When you regulate the economy, the bureaucrats will have more power, and then the next step is to seek rents.
Okay, so the question is, if it is not necessarily going to really benefit the fight against corruption, really benefit the common people, why now? Professor Nalapat, it's always an important question to ask. Of course, the elections is already somewhat boiling in India. Some say this is favoring Mr. Modi's administration, but you also pointed out earlier that in 2 weeks, if things are not calming down, this is certainly going to be a huge blow to his administration and his party.
Well, I think people are being unfair to Mr. Modi when they say that he's looking at some election. I don't think he's looking at election. I think the Prime Minister knows if this move goes badly, it is going to cost him his job. It's going to cost his party the majority in the next parliament. And in fact, his party is going to become extremely unpopular within 6 months if this move goes badly. I think the Prime Minister genuinely believes that India is capable of making the transition to a formal economy in a very quick period of time. He's always said he has immense faith in the Indian people. He has immense faith in the Indian system. So I think he's administering this shock therapy in the belief that India can make a reasonably smooth transition in, as he says, 50 days by the end of December. If it is true, if the transition can be made, but all depends also on liquidity in the system. Now the system frankly has no liquidity, and I can tell you demand is suffering, the economy is suffering. Unless the Central Bank of India meets the task and ensures liquidity latest by December 31, then I think this economy is also going to be in serious trouble, besides Mr. Modi and his party.
Final words from you, Professor Fu. Very briefly, we're running out of time. We see Prime Minister Modi coming up with one campaign after another, well-branded, well-illustrated to the international community, and yet not necessarily making marks. Is this going to be another one of those series? Or this is likely to be a very different name for Mr. Modi?
To go very hard against the corruption is a part of his campaign, and he has to do something such that he keep his promises. And again, as I said, this is a very smart and a technical move against that. It is not going to solve everything, but when you do this, coupled with other reforms, deregulation of the economy, let the market play a more active role, and overall, that will improve the situation. And I guess at this moment, because the world economy has moving in a more technical, electronically connected way, and it also is a call for India to take this opportunity to move cash transaction economy into a more formal economy.
We'll see whether all your wishes would come true. Those wishes are very similar to what the Prime Minister Modi expressed himself. Thank you so much, Professor Fu Jun, Professor Nalapat, for being with us. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.